Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for our webinar. Today, we're covering GLBA Amended Safeguards Rule and the question, are you prepared? So we know this affects many of the clients that we work with, so we wanted to make sure we were getting out information that was pertinent to our clients. You can go to the next slide, Armando. So first and foremost, I want to welcome everybody and thank you for taking time out of your very busy days. It is not lost on me that it's start of school for many of you. So big, thankful appreciation for everybody for joining today. Everybody has come in on mute. Please make sure that you stay muted throughout the presentation until we open it up for Q&A towards the end. Feel free to ask questions in the chat window. I will be moderating those so I can ask. I will even interrupt the presenters if I need to ask if something's pertinent in moment, but just make sure that you utilize the chat window for that piece. This is being recorded for your information and it will be shared out with the group as soon as we get through today. So you will have access to that recording. Feel free to take notes, ask questions, but know that you'll have it for a reference point moving forward as well. Today, you're joined by 3 Ferrilli presenters, and they'll each take a moment to introduce themselves, but I wanted to make sure that you knew Armando is presenting. He's Ferrilli's CISO. We also have Lauren and Bree, and they'll be sharing the information with you today for our webinar. And I'm going to turn it over to Armando. Thank you, everybody.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining our webinar, and definitely welcoming a discussion and some important information that we have to present. My name is Armando Denorio, and I'm the CISO here at Ferrilli, also a senior consultant. I've been in higher education for over 22 years and have started originally as a help desk and moved my way up from help desk to networking to security and ultimately here at Ferrilli. So I'm here as a part of a great team and love to move forward.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Armstrong. I'm an associate consultant here at Ferrilli on the SI team. Thank you for coming to our webinar.
Hi guys, I'm Bree. I'm also an associate consultant on the SI team. I have a master's in cybersecurity and I'm glad you're here.
So getting started, to protect customers' personal identifiable information, GLBA applies to all U.S. financial institutions. It includes all types of organizations that handle personal financial information, also known as personal identifiable information. This includes banks, accounting, bookkeeping firms, and educational institutions. The FTC has officially stated that any college or university that complies with FERPA and that is also a financial institution is subject to the requirements of GLBA. You may ask, why does higher education fall under this regulation? Higher education institutions receive and maintain large amounts of student financial information through their student loans and financial aid processes. And they also have and maintain prospective students, parental, and alumni information as well. A major facelift with impactful changes has come to the 20-year-old law. These changes vary in depth to what is needed to achieve compliance. Each institution must think of their infrastructure and administrative department processes and services and how they handle the various processes involved with personal identifiable information. Think of financial aid as a separate entity, like what we would do with payment cards and the PCI regulation. Here's some more information about the breakdown from Lauren.
The 3 sections of GLBA are the Financial Privacy Rule, which regulates the collection and disclosure of private financial information, The Safeguards Rule, which requires financial institutions to implement security programs to protect this information, and the pretexting provisions, which prohibits the acts of accessing private information under false pretenses.
There are people out there that believe that nobody wants to attack them or their institution, but most attackers are looking around for open doors and windows, no pun intended there. And if your network has any of them, they have most likely already come in and took a look inside. Just like in a large parking lot, or how bad actors go around checking for unlocked doors or open windows, hackers love the easy targets. Who doesn't want a bigger return for less work? A malicious hacker can scan over 100 devices per hour with a single computer, and even in regards to if they have a botnet, when they have multiple computers, they can scan so many more. Even 10 computers can scan 1,000 machines per hour. So you can see how big this actually can get and how quick and easy they can do from their side. And then from another perspective, your credentials or the credentials from someone in your institution are most likely for sale on the dark web. So having perspective and insight from that perspective is very important. So why should you care about security? Earlier this year, Finalsite, a leading school website SaaS provider, suffered a ransomware attack disrupting access to websites to thousands of schools worldwide. According to EDUCAUSE, education is a prime target for cyber criminals. It's also the most affected sector for malware. Last year, the FBI warned of increased ransomware attacks targeting academic institutions, and ransomware more than doubled in education since the onset of COVID pandemic. Ultimately, there's the need for compliance by December, and we don't have to mention the effects that these breaches cause, like reputational harm and the complete halt of operations for days or even weeks.
Hackers often prey on individuals and organizations that seem like easy targets and could provide them with an easy reward.
The 2022 Verizon breach investigation report breaks down the who, what, when, why, and how very well. Some interesting highlights included 75% of the data breaches stemmed from external agents. 41% of the breaches were credentials that were compromised, which led to further data being compromised. And 80% of the breaches were from system intrusion or basic web application attacks, this driving the importance of patching your systems and applications even further. Again, most attackers aren't usually targeting specific organizations. They just want easy targets and a quick reward.
For many institutions, becoming compliant with GLBA has proven to be difficult, despite GLBA awareness increasing over the years. Protecting sensitive data not only protects students, but also institutions from malicious attacks. Complying with GLBA means no penalties or reputational damage for financial institutions that would have otherwise been caused by sharing or loss of private data. Maintaining compliance with GLBA protects student records and helps obtain and maintain client retention and trust, as well as enables clients to feel assured that their information will be kept secure by the institution.
Any department in an institution that's handling student information should be doing so with extreme care. But academic and financial services, such as the registrar, the admissions office, counseling services, and any of the offices listed here, should be paying special attention to the handling of information and complying with security protocols so that student records are protected. Also, consumers should be aware of their right to opt out of information being shared with third parties within a reasonable time frame. And all departments will need to be aware of this decision to make changes on their end as well.
The Financial Privacy Rule, also known as the Privacy Rule, requires financial institutions to provide an annual notice to their clients, detailing their privacy practices and policies. The notice must include what information is being collected, how that information is being used, where and with whom it's being shared, and how it's being protected. The client must also be provided with the option to prohibit the sharing of their information with third parties.
For the implementation of safeguards, the rule requires that an institution develop and maintain a written security plan to protect and safeguard private information. So this policy should ensure security and confidentiality. It should also protect against anticipated threats and unauthorized access. The best way of doing this would be to create systems and plans for the following controls, which are expected to be addressed under the safeguard rule.
Pretexting occurs when someone tries to access personal and private information without the authority to do so. An example of this would be someone impersonating an account holder and requesting private information about that individual. Under GLBA, a person may not obtain or try to obtain customer information about another person under false pretenses.
It's important to be prepared, and it's important to take preventative measures. And that starts with knowing the who's, what's, and where's of your data. Being proactive puts an institution a step ahead of the bad actors already at your door.
So what does it entail to implement a comprehensive information security program? There's a need to identify reasonably foreseeable internal and external risks to sensitive data. You need to provide documentation details on how the identified risks will be assessed and addressed. You need to implement access controls for data and systems that deal with sensitive information. You need to authenticate your users of those information systems using multi-factor authentication for anyone accessing the sensitive information or who has internal network access to those systems containing such information. And then you need to restrict the access to physical locations. A written and detailed incident response plan needs to be created and maintained. And you need to maintain inventories of data, personnel, devices, systems, and facilities. Looking at encrypting all prospective student, parental, and alumni information in transit and at rest, secure development practices for applications being developed in-house and used for transmitting or accessing or even storing such personal information, and secure disposal procedures for that information that is no longer needed is very important. Having change management procedures to document additions, deletions, and modifications, monitoring for authorized and unauthorized user access, and the ability to have audit trails. So making sure you have the logs to tell the story, how it's been accessed, and who has been accessing what information, and then detect and respond to any security events. So, and last and most importantly is the security awareness training side to make sure that you have a comprehensive training to relevant employees. So as outlined in the updated rule, your institution's risk assessment should be formalized and documented. You need to define how you evaluate and categorize your risks. You need to assess how sufficiently your existing controls mitigate those risks, and identify a plan for the implementation of additional mitigations or formal risk acceptance. So if you have any risks outside of your management's risk appetite, those need to be duly noted. Threats constantly evolve and controls should as well. So review and update your assessment periodically. And then routinely perform periodic risk-based assessments and review the safeguards in place to mitigate and control the risks. Evaluating and categorizing the information security risks in your institution including any third-party software and service providers, and what risks they may be bearing by providing their services. But those need to be documented with specific goals based on the threats and risk being faced, and which risks you're willing to accept or not. And then assess the quality and efficiency, of your InfoSec systems, utilizing EDUCAUSE's HECVAT tool, which is the higher education community vendor assessment toolkit, will help you identify those risks associated with the vendors and the products that they supply. And then routinely reporting to the CISO, at least annually, to the institution's board of trustees or equivalent senior leadership.
Conducting risk assessments, monitoring systems, simplifying IT processes to reduce technology footprint, and having cyber insurance are all ways to mitigate risk in an institution.
So how many records containing sensitive and confidential information would be exposed if someone gained access to your student or reporting information systems? The average cost for each lost or stolen record in US higher education is $180 per record, according to the latest IBM security report. Data breach costs surged 13% from 2020 to 2022.
Cyber insurance can be essential in helping an institution recover after data breach. It covers several expenses from equipment damages, revenue loss, forensic analysis, legal fees, and so on. The purpose is to minimize business disruption and ensure financial protection.
Financial institutions should be looking inward, and employees should know how to answer the following questions to ensure alignment with GLBA. Are we storing sensitive data that we don't need? Do we purge applicant and FOFSA data of those that don't attend? Do too many people have access to data they don't need? The answers to these questions will give a pretty good idea of if changes need to be made and what those changes should be.
So you need to assess your cybersecurity risk. Aligning with each function will aid your organization in improving its cybersecurity posture. All organizations, no matter what their size, can implement 5 core functions needed to prevent and recover from a cybersecurity incident. By understanding the likelihood and the impact, you'll be able to determine the amount of risk involved. So every institution is required to have a system in place that shows whether their existing security controls meet all the criteria for GLBA. Institutions should use security standards established under NIST 800-171 as a guide to the requirements. Information security programs need to be developed and written, implemented, and maintained. Designation of a qualified employee responsible for coordinating the information security program. That's a very important part in going through identifying and assessing then the risks to the systems containing sensitive customer information, and then defining and implementing an information safeguards program. So selection of appropriate service providers, as we talked about the HECVAC previously, so you're capable of maintaining appropriate safeguards with those new services and the risks that may be introduced. And then having a periodic evaluation and update to the InfoSec program is needed.
These leadership positions and departments have a crucial role in overseeing GLBA compliance. We have the financial aid department, who will send out annual audits and keep financial data secure. HR, whose job is to communicate across the organization and enforce discipline if necessary. The CISO is the go-to person for all things security, who would develop and lead the security program. And then the IT risk manager or auditor, who will routinely check that everyone is following the guidelines of GLBA and possibly even the security program that was developed by the CISO.
Ask yourself, do we align with the majority of required higher education security policies?
Yes, Brianne, that's a very important question. It needs to be reviewed along with many other items when creating your cybersecurity roadmap. A foundation needs to be built, a cybersecurity governance team and an incident response team should be put together. Your organization should have change control and project management processes in place to document and help keep everyone informed and on track. And especially when dealing with complex projects like incident response, data classification, system security and recovery, and determining your security risk and appetite.
Social engineering is also known as human hacking and is a form of manipulation in order to get the victim to divulge confidential information to the attacker. Social media, the internet, and the dark web contain loads of information about you and your institution. Downloading viruses, money extortion, and credential exposure are a few ways that such information can be used against you.
I think it's also important to note that usually this is the first line of attack going through in phishing and social engineering in order to get into, to get a foothold and then ultimately elevate privileges and move forward in an attack. So that's why we want to point this out.
Security awareness training and management is meant to help minimize risk. There will be an internal or external security team that will establish a basic yet also effective security awareness training program, which should address common mistakes and best practices. This could require collaboration with HR and other departments to ensure everyone is receiving the training. And because there are always changes in the industry, it will be revised as needed and it may need to be taken routinely by the employees of that institution.
And these are just a few examples of some of the enforcing basic rules that you should take a look in your environment as well.
There are GLBA regulations for third-party service and software providers, and financial institutions are liable for those third parties. That is why there is a requirement for periodic assessment of those providers. So think about how you document, review, and scope your processes with service providers so that you and your consumer information will not be compromised.
What mandatory security controls have been added to the Safeguards Rule? You're looking at to authenticate and permit access only to authorized users, limit authorized users to access the need to know information based on their job duties, define the scope through inventory of where and how sensitive information is stored or maintained, so you can adjust your risk scoring appropriately. To encrypt all data in transit and external networks and at rest, looking at document secure deployment practices used in transmitting, accessing, and storing sensitive information, implementing multi-factor authentication for any individual accessing any information systems containing sensitive information, unless your CISO has approved in writing the user of a reasonable equivalent or more secure access controls. And you must advise your customers for your policies and sharing of personal financial information, and give your customers the option to opt out of some of the sharing of their personal financial information.
An institution should verify that they have the technologies needed to routinely monitor and assess systems and user activity. In the event that the institution does not have these technologies, they should have periodic testing completed by a third party. Another good practice would be to keep a record retention system to make sure data that is no longer needed isn't being held. And lastly, a change management process that is periodically tested and does not introduce any risk should be established across the organization. Whenever there is a configuration or a change, a vulnerability assessment must be conducted.
Every institution should have an incident response plan, which is developed after a risk assessment is conducted. The risk assessment should consider the detection, prevention, and response related to various incidents. The updated GLBA rule establishes a written requirement for the plan and outlines 7 specific areas to incorporate. The plan should also support the organization to respond and recover from incidents, minimize the impact of threats, and support an effective and efficient response.
The post-incident evaluation and plan revision following that security event is very important in making sure that you update your responses, especially if it's a different type of threat that you haven't experienced before, so that if it does come back, you're able to respond to it in a better fashion. Accountability for the information security program is a large component of the rule, and it's established in several ways. The program coordination, previously the rule allowed for designation of one or multiple employees to coordinate the program. The updated rule states that a single individual, a qualified individual, should be deemed responsible for the program. Please note, if your institution chooses to outsource, again, this function to a service provider, you still will be responsible for the ultimate oversight of the service providers performing this function. So keeping that in mind. Monitoring for effectiveness. The updated rule provides guidance on ways institutions can evaluate and monitor their information security program for its effectiveness. It includes that continuous monitoring of regular vulnerability assessments and penetration testing is needed. From a remediation standpoint, you need to adjust your InfoSec program after reviewing results of the testing and monitoring that you're doing for any changes in operations, and the results of risk assessments or any other circumstance that may even have reason to have an impact on your program. And then again, approval of exceptions. So creating a process that is put on decisions that are not made in a vacuum, but then deviations should be documented, alternate compensating controls reviewed, and again, written approval provided by the qualified individual. And then remember to incorporate these exceptions into your written risk assessment so that they can be reevaluated.
Institutions that maintain private information for fewer than 5,000 individuals are exempt from needing a written risk assessment, an incident response plan, annual status reporting, and continuous monitoring and pen testing. Any institution holding more than 5,000 records will need to be in compliance with these safeguard rules. This is again why it's important to keep a record retention system.
Again, to reiterate the importance, until that data is purged, your institution has a responsibility to protect it.
The CISO is to report in writing at least annually to the Board of Directors. The report should include the status and general information relating to the information security program and compliance, as well as recommendations for program changes. This goes into effect in December 2022. Once a GLBA non-compliance allegation is proven, the punishment can have business and life-altering ramifications. Some penalties include fines of $100,000 for each violation, and individuals in charge found in violation can face fines of $10,000 for each violation and up to 5 years in prison.
The following are not applicable if the amount of student information being maintained and or stored is lower than 5,000. So looking at risk assessment content, having a written assessment, documenting acceptable risks, the continuous monitoring or periodic pen testing and vulnerability testing, the documentation and reporting, a written IR plan, etc. Documentation of reported security events and related incident response procedures and evaluations of versions of revision, excuse me, as necessary for your incident response plan following a security incident. So these are the calculations and how the number of individuals is determined. It's basically the sum of PII maintained for current students and any data maintained or stored on former students. Until that data is purged, your institution, again, is responsible to protect it. How much can the breach cost? Take your number of student records counts that you've determined from above, and then multiply it by that $180 per record that was provided by IBM. These are just some examples. 100,000 records can cost $18 million, and 500,000 records can cost $90 million. Obviously, these numbers are all detrimental to any institution and can even possibly even close an institution down. And lastly, these are some top level step checklists that you can utilize in determining if you're ready for GLBA. It is a big effort, but it's largely overlapping with the needed cybersecurity measures that your institution should be taking. So take a look at this list to help take a look at your compliance and moving forward. These are just some resources that we utilized in this documentation.
Always feel free to keep track of our What's Happening page at Ferrilli.com. It shows our latest news and upcoming sessions, conference appearances, blog posts, and more possibly. So make sure that you keep that bookmarked. And also you'll receive our e-blasts, of course, which have information on the latest things in security, product updates, anything that we see is pertinent for our client audience. And we're always available at info@ferrilli.com if you have any questions. Also at our 888 line, 888 Unidata for those colleague folks on the call. Always available also through our chat on Ferrilli.com. And we really appreciate everybody for your time. We understand again what a busy time it is, and thank you for taking some time out to discuss this important topic with us. Enjoy the rest of your day.